worse. So I think everyone's here was freaking out just because like Texas has been freaking out for the past like 3 days or
Right.
whatever, been seeing all of that. But like everything they're seeing in Texas is stuff that is just like normal.
Right.
Yeah, like it's
Snow.
just that
Yeah.
Texas hasn't seen it. you know, so
Yeah.
like we have like a thin layer of hail and powder on the ground, and like 2 weeks ago or something like that, it was like at least 5 times as bad as this.
Hmm.
So I don't care. But the entire office had a snow day. I work in a museum,
Okay.
so like I'm in the back corner of a warehouse, which is why I was like, "Do you hear the fan?"
Hmm.
So like I'm back. Like actually, I can just kind of be like, here's all this crap that I'm sorting and like whatever. Let's see. There's a shelf full of just like games and stuff that
Hmm.
like I've been sorting, and like you can kind of peek over there at some warehouse racks. But so anyway, I just kind of live back here whenever I'm at the office and
Okay.
sort stuff for like anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day.
Uh,
Um,
what kind of a
and
museum is it?
sorry.
What kind of museum is it?
Oh, it's two museums. There's a computer museum, which is the host facility,
Hmm.
and then there's my museum, which is Bloop Museum, which is electronic entertainment.
Okay.
So these ideas are obviously pretty married to each other. So like I do all the video game stuff and the like weird, odd, obscure stuff, and the the lighter side, the human element or whatever, and then the computer museum's very like what drove business and industry forward, and
Okay.
stuff like that. So they have a lot of mainframes, and I mean they do have a lot of like PCs and Macs and whatever too. But I'm definitely the like always in search of that like weird obscure computer from France, or like whatever that
Nice.
stuff like that. So we try to complement each other. I'm going to build an Acorn exhibit, which I think is hugely relevant. But no one knows who Acorn is.
Hmm.
Everyone knows who ARM is.
Right.
Like there's an ARM in every cell phone in everyone's pocket. There's an ARM in every DS. There's an ARM in every Game Boy Advance. Like people know what a Newton is probably.
Yeah.
So like they all know about ARM, but they don't know where they got their start. They don't know that there was actually like a desktop 32-bit computer that had an ARM in it,
Hmm.
other than not the Raspberry Pi, obviously, but
Right.
like a real desktop computer in the 90s, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna build that as an oddly enough, but then finish it off, I think, with like a Raspberry Pi running the operating system from like 1997 or
No,
whatever.
well, that's really cool. And it's really crazy because like you're talking about the stuff that old computers from like the 90s, but it's like that was 20, 30 years ago, or well, I guess 90s was a little bit 30 years ago, but like that's not that long. It's
It's
crazy long in terms of technology timeline, but in reality, it's really not that long, and it's kind of a crazy thing of, oh, look at these ancient computers from 10 years ago, or
yeah,
something like that.
it's sort of a strange dichotomy. Like I live in a world where this stuff is historically relevant, but it's stuff that I just like used to use.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, like a better example that might even be more accessible to people is like Doom is an old game,
Hmm.
and we joke all the time on the internet, but does it run Doom?
Yeah.
Like and whatever. But it is actually like a little piece of history. No one, people are just happen to still be playing Doom remakes, or
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. But like, it's not, it's not a new game. So it's weird to think about that. Or like, I mean, obviously relevant to me, I did and am campaigning for Pretty 8 Machine on vinyl right now.
Hmm.
So like Nine Inch Nails is hugely relevant, which is like the Quake element, and reading about like Nine Inch Nails involvement in games in the 90s, and that sort of a thing. And here I am, like releasing a tribute to like basically the seminal industrial metal album that
Yeah.
brought it into like everyone's vernacular on vinyl, like
That old.
which is a medium that is basically dead but revived. Yes, my
Yeah.
world is weird.
Well, do you want to do you want to start jumping into things? I mean, like, do you want to tell us how you got
Yeah, we
started
can
making music and
we can talk about whatever you want.
all right.
You can cut and paste this in a way that seems relevant, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I was planning to record like a little intro segment, but I might use some of that because it kind of really, it's kind of just trying to break the
It's
ice a little
fine.
bit at the beginning, and but some of it might be useful. But do you want to tell us how you got started in making music and like how did that lead up to Pretty Eight
Whew.
Machine?
Oh God, how it led to Pretty Eight Machine is the long story, but we can make. Let's. I guess we start at the beginning, which is like my family is very musical. My mom is a classical pianist, and my dad is like still musical and listening to music all the time, and I think did a healthy amount of like singing. He's not really an instrumentalist, but my granddad did choir and operatic style singing, and like plays. It has like this crazy organ in his house, and like he likes to troll his neighbors by like playing Phantom of the Opera on it and whatever, which is kind of hilarious.
Nice.
But like so I'm in this hugely musical family, and so logically my parents wanted to put me in some sort of music school or something like that, and they at the ripe old age at like 4.5 or whatever, they put me in like Yamaha keyboarding 1, where they teach you to play a single tiered organ, which is basically just like probably a Yamaha junk FM keyboard with a really nice case on it.
Okay.
There's nothing special about it, and keyboarding 1 is really just like piano for dummies. It's not here's a staff, here's notes. We know you're only 4, but this is a language you're going to speak for the rest of your life. Blah blah blah. So I didn't like it. It just wasn't very fun. I mean, like I got into it, I guess, and
Is it
like I
like
played through.
was it like a structure thing of like you had to fit between these lines and
I, I mean,
plus your
there's
4?
definitely some structure. Yeah, I mean, as much structure as you can give a 4 or a 5-year-old or whatever. And I don't know, it wasn't bad or anything. It just, I don't know. It felt weird. Keyboard, and I mean, like, I guess when you're getting used to something new, it's always going to be weird. And, like when you're a little kid, you're always going to rebel. And like,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are all sorts of things. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is I didn't really take to it. And I didn't get further than that as far as learning to read sheet music. Like I
Okay.
never took it to the next level. So, I mean, like I can sit there and count up the lines and be like, every good boy, okay, that's an F, like, and, but I'm not fast at reading sheet music. I can't look at it and be like, I can tell you the notes go up, the notes go down. I can tell you what the symbols mean.
Hmm.
Like I took general music in 7th grade. Like we learned some stuff. Like
Right.
but like I mean that's like the extent of my music background. Other than
Okay.
that, like everything else is just I dicked around on a piano, in this like in several different areas, and then since my mom already had a piano, I'd just be sitting around at home and I'd be like dink 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 dink. Oh hey, I could play Tetris on a piano, or I mean like whatever.
Right.
So like that gets us to roughly the late 80s. And suddenly I'm getting hardcore into computers. I also, another thing I learned to do when I was like 5 is program in BASIC. So, I learned to, I mean, I don't, you're maybe a little bit younger than I am, but do you remember basic programs in books?
No,
Like,
not
so,
really.
okay,
Sorry.
so I'm a little bit showing my age here or whatever, but the point is that like you could go to the library or even just like order books or get magazines or whatever, and there would be like basic programs, like program listings in a magazine.
Okay.
And there were a lot of magazines that were like notorious for doing this. And they'd be like, hey, do you want a program that will play tic-tac-toe and you don't want to like go out and buy tic-tac-toe on a tape to load on your computer,
Hmm.
then just type in this program and you'll have tic-tac-toe, and then
Right.
you can
And
save.
it'd be
You
like
know,
it'd be like a page of just the code, right?
yeah,
Like you need to
it'd be
go.
just a page of code. You type it into BASIC, and you can save it if you want. But you could also just type it in every time you wanted to play
Sure.
tic-tac-toe, which isn't, I mean, no one has the patience for that these days. But like back then, that was, I mean, in an era where computers already take, like minutes to start up just to give you a prompt and
Yeah.
check their RAM and whatever, like this is no big deal. And especially once you got good at typing instead of hunting and pecking,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
again, so you'd get not just a page for tic-tac-toe, but you'd get books that are like, here's a game that's like 7 pages long or whatever. And so I
Hmm.
started getting fascinated by this. I learned more. I started breaking out of games and realizing they were written in BASIC. And like I had this like game kind of like Star Raiders, kind of a 3D shooter, where you're like flying around in space or whatever. I was like, this is too hard. And so I broke and found out it was BASIC, and I found the place where you could enter the difficulty level and made it so you
Gotcha.
could enter 0 for difficulty instead of 1. What
Hmm.
I didn't realize is that then no enemies would show up because it based the number of enemies on
How
your
many?
difficulty or
Yeah.
whatever. Oops. So I started learning that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fast forward to like again the end of the 80s or whatever, music software is starting to get serious. I'm learning programming and music and whatever, and they're like sound and music and play commands and whatever. And so I'm like trying to experiment with that. And at the same time, I'm like completely barraged with all of this stuff. My friend has an Amiga and it plays this amazing sampled music. Like we get into the early 90s and like my parents give me a sound card for Christmas. After I built my own computer, like at a computer show, and the guy's like freaking out that like an 11-year-old was like building a computer in front of him. And he's like, come back in 5 years and I'll give you a job.
Wow.
It was really cool. It's too bad I never went back there, but, uh, you know, point is, so like suddenly I'm inundated by all of this stuff. And I think that the one game changer in all of this is actually related to that computer store, or the computer show story.
Hmm.
And that is that while I was building this computer at a computer show, it's, like 286 with a meg of RAM. It's nothing, crazy. You can barely play Wolfenstein on it. But across the aisle was a dude with a sound card and a music player for the PC called Track Blaster.
Okay.
And it's the first mod player. Do you know what a mod is?
No, I'm not familiar. Sorry.
Okay, so mod files are these like sampled 4-channel
Okay.
music files.
Yeah.
So it's like wavetable MIDI, but the samples are in the file.
Okay.
So they always sound the same no matter what you play them on. Whereas with MIDI, like it's just recordings of data.
Hmm.
And, like grand piano might sound better on someone's machine and worse on another machine.
Okay.
Or someone might have a synth plugged in, or like their really fancy MIDI keyboard plugged in and get like real recordings of pianos. And someone else might have, like a crappy MIDI synth that just has this like synthesized,
Sure. Okay.
piano sound or whatever. You probably heard the term MIDI guitars,
Yeah. Yeah.
like because they sound like synthesized guitars. That's like, so
Okay.
I don't really like MIDI for this reason. I realize you can get really good outboard gear and you can get really good MIDI sequencers, and as long as everything's good, you're good, but there's just all sorts of nightmares. Whereas the thing that I really loved about these mod files is that I could take a file from a PC to an Amiga and it would sound exactly the same.
Right.
And, like there are these distinct commands that would always, well, maybe not always, but they were always intended to be processed the same. So like when I apply vibrato to a sample that's traveling with the file, so the sample is always going to be the same. The vibrato in theory sounds the same, or a pitch bend in
Right.
theory sounds the same,
Yeah.
right? So this really, I mean, this is later in the game. This is me actually writing mod files. But what got me into these mod files was watching them play back in this Track Blaster program and whatever. I was like, dude, this is like my friend's Amiga, right?
Yeah.
And I'm watching, and they've got like CNC Music Factory and like all of these like MC Hammer 80s and 90s music and whatever, and and it's like the real recordings of the songs. If you found a MIDI rendition of like MC Hammer or whatever, there would be no voice. It would just be like someone trying to imitate the song with whatever their MIDI instruments are. But again, this is samples, this is
Right.
recordings. I was really excited
Yeah.
to hear, the stuff. And these are like songs that fit on a floppy disk. So like, in the mid 90s, everyone's freaking out, or late 90s or whatever, everyone's freaking out about Napster and MP3s and Music Match and,
Yeah.
whatever, and Winamp and WinPlay 3, which is, the predecessor to Winamp, and, all of that mess. And, we're freaking out about being able to actually download a full length song over a modem. But 5-10 years prior to that, we were able to download songs that were even smaller than that and still sounded like renditions of the song, or were renditions of the song,
Yeah.
and sounded like it, right? So anyway, my freak out about these mod files was what signaled my parents to get me a sound card for Christmas. Getting the sound card caused me to call up that guy from the computer show and order like 20 floppy disks full of these, mod files and the player and whatever. And then I started calling BBSs, got myself in trouble because I would call a bunch of computers long distance and whatever. Think war games, except no government involvement.
Sure. Yeah.
and so, like all of this is happening. But I'm finding the music software to write these mods, and I'm finding mods from other people. I'm downloading mods from, everywhere from like Connecticut Music Channel BBS to like Looking Glass in Florida, to all of these different BBSs. And suddenly I have this like huge collection of songs on my hard drive. My hard drive's full. It's only 30 megs. And like, I'm like writing this music with other people's samples, sending a handwritten letter to Format, who is like a guy in the scene that writes a whole bunch of like chip tunes and
Okay.
mod music and whatever. And he did a Depeche Mode cover of Enjoy the Silence and whatever. And it's really good. There was no vocals, but like he sampled the drum loop, and like it actually sounded really good. And so picture like an 11-year-old being like, I really like your Depeche Mode cover. Can you please do, like these songs and
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, so dumb because like I didn't realize how much work was going into it. But like less than a year later, I'm the one writing these. I'm the one, using this tracker, which is like, it looks like, an Excel spreadsheet with a play button. It's really rudimentary, but it's good. I like it. It jives with me. It's like nothing, the sheet music thing didn't work with me. The note roll thing didn't work, or piano roll or whatever, didn't work with me. None of these other forms of music really made sense. I mean, like it wasn't something I could read and be like, this is what my song is doing. And suddenly I see this tracker thing. I'm like, wow. So that can be stretched all the way to now. I'm not only still using trackers 30 years later or whatever, but I'm also writing my own tracker and building a synthesizer that my own tracker can control. And, there are like thousands of trackers and whatever out there that are all different purposes for different machines, retro machines, new machines. You may have heard of Renoise. That's a reasonably modern music package that still has a tracker interface, but allows you to use, like modern instruments and plugins and whatever.
That's pretty cool.
So like the tracker still exists. It's just this sort of niche group of people that use it.
Okay.
And we all love it. And, like it's just a thing. So the big thing that has changed is that even though 30 years later I'm using trackers, I'm not using samples anymore. I'm completely obsessed with old sound chips and synthesis, and like I like samples. I use samples in some of my stuff. For example, speaking of Pretty 8 Machine, the Nine Inch Nails tribute, like I use the crowd roar from Punch Out in Down In It, because it's like the exact same crowd roar.
Okay.
If you listen to the two, it sounds like I might have just lifted it from, Down In It, but actually it's
a different one. Okay.
It's,
I'll have to go check that out.
Yeah, like listen back and forth, and it's like it's uncanny. But like only if there's some cool reason to use the sample do I want to use the sample.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'm really interested in like waveforms and how to create waveforms and how one waveform, interacts with another waveform and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Um, so I stopped. I realized maybe 2005-ish. So, 15 years, basically at the halfway point between now and when I started
Hmm.
using trackers, that I'm okay with the samples. I can write sort of a believable sounding rock song or whatever that doesn't just sound like MIDI guitars, although it sort of does. And then I was like, why don't I just try like writing Nintendo music?
Hmm.
And I wrote something, and I was like, okay, this sort of sounds like Nintendo music. And I got in touch with, do you know who Jake Kaufman is?
No, sorry.
His nickname is Vert. He wrote the music for Shovel Knight, if you've heard of that, or Shantae, if you've heard of that.
Hmm.
A bunch of other stuff. But he's famous among video game
Okay.
soundtrack composers or whatever. And he's a U.S. composer, and he's roughly my age, and whatever. And he also does stuff like that. And I sent him some of my stuff, and he's like, "This sucks." and and I was like, well, what's the problem? And he's like, well, you're writing chip tunes using samples of sound chips, and I can tell.
Hmm.
And so I was like, well, so what makes you able to tell? And he's like, well, one, you sent me a file with samples in it, but two, like there are certain limitations of all of these systems,
Hmm.
and you kind of know better, but like what you're doing is just trying to imitate it, and you didn't realize that you're not faking the funk well enough. So he was like, read, like the NES sound specification, and he just links me to a
Hmm.
document that someone wrote up to, like model emulators after, and like all this stuff. And I start reading this, and I was like, my eyes just like were open, and I started writing for systems and discovered, I mean, since then trackers exist. Like there's a very famous tracker called Famitracker, because the NES is called the Famicom
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
Japan. So Famitracker is Famicom Tracker.
Okay.
And you specifically write NES music in it. It's actually a Nintendo emulator, like crammed up the butt of a tracker.
Hmm.
So there are all of these trackers that are specifically for sound chips for all of these old systems and whatever. And I am down that rabbit hole, to the point where the synthesizer that I'm building is actually hardware boards with the sound chips out of those systems on the hardware boards. And my tracker directly translates the tracker commands into commands that go to the sound chips.
Okay.
So, I can be like, play a C#4 in channel 1 with instrument 5 or whatever. And fortunately, the cool thing is that those, that's exactly what you write in the tracker, like C4, you know, um, like in the first column, because you want channel 1. So you'd write like C#4,
Okay.
O5, F for like the top volume, and then, like it might put an effect or whatever. And you just put that in there. It's like, oh, and they're like, there's almost a one-to-one, like command translation sort of thing that can happen. Like
Okay.
I can directly translate that into something that I can poop at the sound chip. And, like it's like, oh yeah, okay. And it just starts making that noise. And the big deal about the sound chip is that I don't have to like constantly, like modern sound hardware, your phone, your computer, whatever, you put the sound wave of what you want to happen in memory somewhere, and you're like, hey, sound card, play this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with these old sound chips, what you're doing is you're saying, make this tone, this volume, this waveform, and the chip just constantly makes the tone until you interrupt it or tell it something else. And
Okay.
it's not getting it from memory or anything. It's actually creating the noise on the fly.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so we throw those commands at the chip. I don't have to like create music in memory or anything like that. I just send the commands off to the chip, and it just makes music. And so this is how, like an old Nintendo that's literally like half the speed of your graphing calculator from high school or whatever can actually run like an impressive game,
Right.
uh,
Okay.
you know, and do a decent job, is because, like all of the tasks are offloaded from, you know, the CPU. It doesn't have to worry about how to like play the sound. It just sends a command and forgets about it.
Okay.
So this is the really long answer, but the
No, it's all
point
good.
is that how all of this culminates is I started with Nintendo music, but then, like I said, I went down the rabbit hole. So I learned about Commodore, I learned about Atari, I learned about MSX, I learned about, you know, like all of these different systems or whatever. And in an effort to, you know, like as Bert ordered me to do, get good at all of these systems, I learned how they worked. I learned, you know, a tracker for that system or whatever. Decided I would write a Nine Inch Nails song in each one of those. And bam, suddenly had like the entire first album of Nine Inch Nails. Um, and yeah, I mean, I use that as my basis because someone at a convention was listening to my like pop covers and whatever. He's like, "That's really cool. You know, do you have anything by Nine Inch Nails?" And I was like, "Well, I don't, but maybe there's something on the internet. I'll go look for it. Come back tomorrow and I'll play you something." And I couldn't find anything,
Really? Okay.
so I just like wrote 2 minutes of Head Like a Hole on a Commodore 64, like in my hotel room at a convention that night, and then brought it back the next day and just played it. And the guy like comes back and I hit play and everyone's like staring at me and they're like, "Where did you find this? This is really good." And like I didn't at first, I didn't have the heart to tell them. I just like wrote it in an hour in a hotel room. and and so anyway, you know, then we, you know, like it snowballed downhill and I started writing more and more. I lost all of my jobs immediately after making a decision to make the album. So I kickstarted the album in 2011, and we did digital and we did CDs, and I did a run of shirts and whatever. And in the midst of all that, there was an earthquake in Virginia that year. I don't know if anyone remembers this or whatever, but so my water heater explodes, floods my basement, lose like 2 rooms full of gear
Oh wow.
in my house or whatever. And my landlord basically used it as an excuse to tell me to get out. And I had to move to another state. So I spend a half a year to a year moving all of my belongings from Virginia to Maryland, and like interrupting the, you know, like work on the album and everything and whatever. And all my Kickstarter backers are pissed at me and whatever. And it finally comes out in like June of 2012. And you know, like, I don't know. I think it was, well, I released it to all of my backers, of which there
Yeah.
were like maybe 160 or something like that. You know, I was like, okay, I'll get the CDs pressed and they'll come in, and, you know, get the shirts next and those will come in. And I said I would do a special edition. Um, and we released it. We had a little listening party. Um, and yeah, I think I got like a couple dozen sales like during the listening party or whatever.
Sure.
And I just went to bed. You know, like didn't expect anything to come out of it. Other than that, I was like, okay, I did the thing. It's
Yeah.
finished.
You
I'm
completed
satisfied.
yeah.
I was going to a convention the next day to, you know, possibly sell some copies and, you know, give a panel on exactly what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, that sort of a thing. And I was like, all right. And then like the next morning at like 8:30 a.m., I had made friends with the guy that runs Nine Inch Nails Hotline, which is like
Yeah.
the #1 fan site
Yeah.
for Nine Inch Nails stuff. Okay. So that guy is Matt Dunphy. And we had been talking, and he was sort of on my like secret listening team to tell me whether my tracks sucked or not.
Okay.
And he just puts out a tweet. He's like, "Pretty Eight Machine is out and it's awesome." Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that tweet was instantly, you know, like in the eyes of, you know, I don't know, they had like 20,000 followers or something like that. So and this is on Twitter in the like in the golden age where, you know, 20,000 was actually a scary number or something. You know, now it's like 5 billion people, no big deal. But so that goes out. I was like, all right, that's cool. And that generated a little bit of a bum rush, you know, got some balls rolling or whatever. And in the meantime, I'm just like frantically like putting stuff in the car to go to this convention. So I don't really have time to pay attention to it.
Right.
So 9:30 rolls around and my phone goes off, and it's Rob Sheridan the Nine Inch Nails
Yeah.
art director,
Right.
and he's put out a very matter of fact tweet that's like, Pretty Hate Machine is a recreation of Pretty Hate Machine on 8 different 8-bit consoles. Link. No, like it's good, it's bad. Just like this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where you can get it. And then the retweets start rolling in, and everything starts rolling in, and whatever. And we get in the car and start going up, and then the Nine Inch Nails actual
The
account
account.
retweets Rob, which presumably he's in charge of both the accounts, so it was probably him or something.
Sure.
And so then that goes out, and my phone dies on the way to the convention because it's vibrating and making so much noise and whatever. And I actually have no way to get in touch with the organizers of the event and to let them know we were like 15 minutes late and stuck in traffic and like all this stuff.
It's all happening
And
all
I
at once.
finally
Yeah.
like get to the convention place and everything's fine. And I set down my laptop and plug my phone into charge because I have like screenshots of like the album is already, like doing really well and whatever. And, like I don't even know how many people have retweeted or seen the album. I don't know how many sales. I have nothing. I just know that it was enough to kill my phone.
Right.
So I figure that's pretty serious. And someone in the audience actually interrupts me while I'm talking about this, and they're like, "Did you know that you're the #1 album on Bandcamp right now?"
Whoa.
And I was like, "What?"
That's crazy.
I apparently held on to it for about a week,
Nice.
which is just nuts. Like I can't. All of this just feels like a dream still. Like even then, now, whatever. It was really really wild. But so like literally overnight or in a day, I became like the 8-bit Nine Inch Nails guy.
Yeah.
And no one knows any of my other work. I mean, they do, but like not, only the people that are fans that have actually decided to follow or order something else, or the people that like clicked buy discography on Bandcamp instead of, well, and you couldn't buy an entire discography back then. You actually had to like go and add
And do
each
individual
thing
ones.
to the cart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of that. So like, I mean, it was a different world back then, and I don't know. It was really it's fascinating experience. A year later, How to Destroy Angels is touring, which is, like a lot of people consider it like Nine Inch Nails side act, but it's actually like, it's Trent's band. It's not Trent's band, it's Trent's wife's band, as she's basically the front man and Trent is in the background. Rob is doing live visuals and, Atticus is with them and they're traveling. Anyway, that was a really cool act. I don't know if you ever saw
that's
it
such a fun project. Yeah, for sure.
So they're touring, and we go to the New York City show, and I thought that they mentioned that there's going to be a meet and greet, and I got this like this suspicious anonymous call. There was no one on the other line, and whatever. But I made it known that I was going to that show in New York City at the Apollo, which is a really wild venue. And I thought that I might have a chance of like meeting up with Trent and that sort of a thing. So and in the meantime, I had made friends with everyone on Echoing the Sound, which is like the Nine Inch Nails forums, right.
Yeah.
And so then in line, I ended up meeting up with a bunch of people that are on the forums that got pre-sale tickets and
that's cool.
That sort of a thing, and that was pretty neat. And like people were like, "Yo, go and get some of your CDs. We'll buy some." And like I ran to the car, which was like 4 blocks away, and picked some up, and just like I don't know. That was fun. And I did not get a chance to meet up with Trent, but I did manage to track down his tour manager and handed him a Robotron cartridge, which I don't know if you know Trent's icon is from Robotron 20.
Right. Okay. Yeah. From Twitter.
The robot or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let's hand him a copy of Robotron that has that icon, and I put my business card in the back with like a phone number on the back. I was like, give me a call or would love to meet up or whatever
Yeah,
because
you
I
got to
didn't
try.
have,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and that didn't work out. But then at the last minute, so that was the closest show to me, like being in the Baltimore area or whatever.
Right.
At the last
Yeah.
minute, they had their Silver Spring show, which is like right in my backyard.
Oh, okay.
And so we literally like my girlfriend at the time, she gets home, and she's like, we're going to buy tickets for the Silver Spring show. She's like home from work. The show is like already started, but like we could drive there in like 45 minutes and the opener is still playing. So we're like,
Sure.
we could probably make most of the show. That was a very different show. That was more of a standing room only general audience thing whereas at the Apollo, it was like everyone was
You had
seated and
seats. Yeah.
it
Okay.
was a little bit different.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting, different experience, right? And I got more of those anonymous calls that day. And
So sorry.
so,
So with
and
the
these were like
anonymous.
numberless or like weird number calls,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't explain what it was. And those were the only 2 days that I got them ever.
And they're
Like,
so and they're calls and there's nobody on the other end. Like,
right.
huh?
And I couldn't figure out what was going on. So anyway, I approach the person at the box, and I was like, listen, this is really weird, but bear with me. Is there like a list of people that are allowed to like meet up with the music acts or something like that? Like,
Yeah.
I did a Nine Inch Nails tribute, and obviously Trent is in this band. And like I've sent a message, and I'm in touch with his manager. And like I have won tickets for a show in the past and whatever, and like I feel like there's a chance that I could just ask to somehow meet up with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're like, I it list like, do you mean like the list for the venue? And I was like a band supplied the list or something like that.
Okay.
That's what I would be on, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, there is no band supplied list at all. I was like, all right, well, that's fine. And I'm doing this like in the middle of the show,
Right.
right?
Right.
So then I turn around to go back in the show, and they're like, sorry, no readmission.
Oh.
And I was like, what? And they're like, well, I was like, all right, so if I were, and I mean, it was towards the end of the show, and I had actually like, I mean, I saw the entire show
Mm-hmm.
at the Apollo or whatever. So I was like, all right, tell me this. If I wanted a chance at like, to like yell at the band or, like be that shameless fan that, like is like sign my tits or whatever, like, will you tell me where I should go? And they're like, okay, so here's the deal. There are these barriers and there's a parking lot next door. We don't own the parking lot. We don't own the barriers. Beyond the barriers is our property, and we can, like we can call the cops on you if you, like if you cross the barriers or whatever.
Yeah.
That's trespassing. But if you're in the parking lot, we can't do anything about it.
Okay.
So you should hang out there and try to get your message heard from there.
Okay.
I go back there. There's only two guys back there. There's one guy who was actually named Reznor after Trent Reznor, like,
funny.
and it's in an era where, I mean, like, so this is 2013, right? And
Yeah.
Pretty Hate Machine came out in 1989. So the dude could be 24,
Right.
like, right? So anyway, this dude wants to get his birth certificate signed. And then this other guy was very loud and obnoxious and said that he had jumped up on stage during the Lights in the Sky tour and slapped Trent on the ass. So he demanded a signature from Trent for that reason. And
then,
I was like, all right, this guy's a little bit special, but that's fine, whatever. Do you.
It's a very interesting trio of the three of you. Yeah, you've got yeah.
And so I identified myself to the guard, right, who is clearly on the property of the
venue.
And I was like, listen, this is why I'm here. I'm just lurking over there. I'm not a serial killer, like whatever. And he's like, that's fine, but I can't do anything for you. I want you to know.
Sure.
And I was like, that's fine. Like, there's no one that you can tell that I'm like lurking over there or whatever that might increase my chances. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do, and I'm really busy with these two guys. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna back off and let him deal with that. So I tried to be as polite as I could, and like belligerent dude keeps on, like keeping on, and like I'm just talking to the birth certificate guys, like, yo, I heard your album actually, it was really good. I was like, oh, that's cool, like so. Eventually, there's this like huge line of everyone behind the barrier, like
Sure.
just like you see in whatever movie with rock stars, and
Yeah. Yeah.
or if you've just been in that scene, then you know exactly what it looked like. And so we're all hanging out behind the barrier or whatever, and we're all just chatting because we're all just there. Like there's no line, there's no order.
Yeah.
Like we're just people. It's kind of like when you're in line before the show, except again, there's no line. Um, and So it turns out like a whole bunch of the people there do know who I am because they've heard the album. I mean,
Right.
it's been a year,
Yeah.
like it's gotten around, and plus, like my phone died announcing how many people bought it and whatever. So like, I mean, it got around. So all of these people know, and we see people like periodically going in and out of the back door. We think that maybe like Atticus or someone, I don't, like came out back for a smoke,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, or just to see how bad things were with the crowd, or who knows. And and so like they come in and they come out, and like we're yelling like nice show, and like whatever, and
Yeah.
that's fine and good. And yeah, I mean, when I first got there, the show was still going, so like some of us had waited for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my girlfriend and a couple others are like, you just got to get noisy and shit. And so I tweet at Trent and Rob and whatever. I'd be like, yo, we're out back. Is there any chance that like we could meet up with you or
Yeah.
say hi or whatever? Um, and I managed to get a couple, like people liking and retweeting and like, replying and being like,
Yeah.
yo, meet up with these guys. They're there, like,
Yeah.
and whatever, like cheering me on and whatever. And this is my moment, like this bouncer comes out of the back door, different bouncer dude,
Mm-hmm.
is intimidating as hell, like, tall, wide, everything, and he's like, where's the 8-bit guy? And this is like before like David the 8-bit guy, formerly the iBook guy or whatever, was the 8-bit guy. I was the 8-bit guy. So uh everyone, we've all been talking, so everyone's just like looking over the barrier, and they all turn and look at me, and like all eyes on me, all spot, like they might as well have just shown a spotlight on me, because everyone knew exactly. And I was like, I guess that's me. and and he's like, you, only you, come with me. Like, oh god, I'm gonna get murdered. Like, so
That's awesome.
my girlfriend hops the barrier along with me, and we both pop in the back door, go down some stairs, and Atticus Ross meets me inside. And I had actually met Atticus the previous day,
Oh.
when he was like crossing the street to go into the Apollo and take pictures and whatever. And so I was like, oh, Atticus. He's like, so like, I don't think you ever. What's your real name anyway? Like, because everyone knows me as like Inverse Phase. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's Brendan, but you can call me Inverse Phase if you want. Or and he's like, oh, already mysterious, or something rather English sounding, and leads me down, and like hiding behind. I mean, there's just gear all over the hallways and whatever. It's backstage, right?
Yeah.
And Trent is just like hanging out in like sweatpants and a hoodie behind like a rack of audio gear or something, not on purpose, just because there's no other place to go. And we have like a 5 or 10 minute chat. And,
Nice.
like he introduces me to Rob, and like, I don't know, we sat around and chatted. He told me that like my album was pretty good. And he had actually, so a couple months prior, he had sent me an email,
Oh.
which was really nice, and told me that he like felt like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it.
Hmm.
And, like whatever, and ordered 10 copies, and
Nice.
like asked me if he could give them out with copies of Pretty Hate Machine. And I was like, dude, it's your album. Like, do what like, and so, like we had this sort of like really nice conversation. I asked him if he makes faces in photos, like, or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, give me a face. And I made some like really stupid looking face. We both had a laugh over it. And there's this like picture of me circulating with Trent of both of us having like laughing at how stupid I am, and that was pretty good. But wow, this has become storytelling hour. But
No,
I mean
it's great.
That was like basically it. Like it wasn't like, I mean, he mentioned in passing that like maybe there would be a chance that like he could use some of my stuff in the future or whatever, and that was really exciting. But like nothing happened. He's busy as hell, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like and just all of this stuff, and he signed my copy of my album. So like I have a copy of Pretty Hate Machine with Trent Reznor's signature on it, which is
That's pretty awesome.
In hindsight is awesome, but maybe I should have gotten him to sign something of his rather than mine.
I don't know. That's pretty fun. I mean, it'd be kind of desecrating it a little bit, but it'd be funny if it was up on the wall and you see that signed by Trent Reznor, but then you've X'd it out and you've put your own signature next to it and like that's framed. But
but yeah, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I told him, I was like, I don't know if this is like, a faux pas to, like,
could you sign my
have
thing?
you sign this or whatever? And he actually signed it twice. He signed the cover and the CD. So
Nice.
like, I guess, it's Trent endorsed,
Trent approved.
But so I did that, and then it's just kind of been quiet for a little while. But it's clearly, I mean, it's the best-selling album in stores. It's the best-selling album, at conventions, whatever. Like I mean, I've got like a slew of pop covers, and like I did the same thing with Fall Out Boy. I didn't get to like meet up with him at a show or anything, but like I've got a little EP of Fall Out Boy stuff.
Yeah, you've got a lot of stuff.
So anyway, long story short, I'll blast these at a convention or a show or whatever, and people walk by, and they'll like kind of slow down and stop and turn and like
wait a minute,
be like, is that 9 Inch Nails on an Atari? And I'd be like, yeah, and they'd be like, tell me what's going on here. And so then, I mean, but that's the point is, like I want them to stop and ask me what my shtick is, so I can tell them about all of my like obsessions with old machines and like how it's written, and nerd out with like everyone.
Yeah, no, so, that's awesome.
That is, and I mean, it gets me on podcasts, so hey.
Here you go. Well, so I kind of want to ask a little bit about the new campaign through Bandcamp.
Yeah, sure.
So this whole thing where they're releasing stuff on vinyl, like this is like a beta program. Like,
right.
How has that process been like?
Okay. So I mean, when was it? Like maybe 5-10 years ago or something like that. Bandcamp was like, we're gonna start Bandcamp on wax.
Okay.
And they had only like pressed like 3 records, and I think one of them was I'm trying to remember who the people were that like they were people that are now big names, but back then I was just like, who are these people and why are they getting records that Bandcamp is just like deciding that like that
how did they get that
person
approval?
Should be on a record. But I mean, like, whatever, they just pick people they like, so fine, whatever. So when going back to I mentioned that Pretty Hate Machine is really popular at shows and whatever, right? I always have like 3 or 4 CDs with me, sometimes some bonuses, USB sticks with like my entire discography. And recently I did a boss track for a game called Slime Son, and it's like an all-star chiptune artist soundtrack.
Okay.
So it's not just me, it's like 13 or whatever chiptune artists. And we all got like a tiny piece of the pie. It's pretty tiny, but the point is that they printed the soundtrack on vinyl, And so finally, all of the people that came to, hear me at a show or whatever, and came to buy stuff from me, they'd be like, "You got anything on vinyl?" I'd be like, "I got this," and I was the one that mastered it, so that was kind of,
That's really
a
cool.
bonus, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so people are yelling at me to get vinyl, and I mean, I just looked into all the short run record options, and
From
you
what I
know,
can tell, it's such a huge process. And there's like a
it's it's
backlog and all that.
incredible. It's intimidating. It's
Yeah.
daunting. I mean, definitely the sites are trying to make it easier, and just give you a bunch of blanks to fill out, submit your masters. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll see you in about 3 months. Like, um, but um, but even then, it's like, okay, so once you have, like 500 records, you have to like resend a pile of them to people that, got damaged records and shipping,
Yeah. You got to
or,
keep some
I mean, there's
extras.
like, or people that just got bad pressings and you need to like, so you need to order extras for that.
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff. And so, uh, my gumption here is Bandcamp was like, let's make this for our higher performing artists, or for like, they tried Bandcamp on Wax and it worked
Hmm.
because they picked people that they were going to push.
Yeah.
um, Now they're not really pushing people, but they're opening it up to anyone that has like a decent performer. For me, my
Sure.
decent performer is Pretty Ape Machine. So I assume there's like a threshold
Sure. That makes
for
sense.
who gets invited to the beta. And I got an email, I don't know, 2 months ago or something like that, saying, hey, you want to press vinyl with Bandcamp? We've now got the cute little thing that is like an almost exact carbon copy of any of these like record companies that are trying to make it easy.
Hmm.
Like, how many vinyl do you want? One or two? Is it 33 or 45? Like, do you
Yeah.
want splatter or do you want black? Do you want inners? So should they be white or black? No inners. Do you want a gatefold? I mean, like,
Yeah.
all of the options, right? Those are all on, like, if you go to, I don't know, Mobineco or any of those, like print your own vinyl, even short runs, you'll see all the options. So
Right.
it's like they just cut and pasted that onto the Bandcamp site.
Hmm.
But then it submits that to, and there are other pages, right? So you're
Sure.
picking a digital, like they've integrated the, here's your digital album that you already have on Bandcamp
Right.
into that,
Okay.
right? So normally you would, upload a 24-bit WAV file or something like that, and call it good.
Hmm.
But now, like, what you're doing is saying, I want this Bandcamp album on this record.
Okay.
Pick the options. They're trying to make it easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For sure.
they do that. Um, and then they ask you, like, okay, um, do you want any extra tiers? Do you want to include extra stuff with the records? Like,
Yeah.
kind of adding a little bit of a Kickstarter Indiegogo flair
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it. And I learned a few difficulties are there. Like, I really wanted to have a T-shirt tier.
Hmm.
So there's like record, and then there's record plus T-shirt. I thought
Yeah.
that'd be good, right?
Yeah. That seems pretty
It
classic.
turns out they don't want to jam a shirt in with the record, and they've had trouble with that and whatever, so they wouldn't do it. So they told me to remove the T-shirt tier. um, and that's frustrating because I just have to, like, people want the T-shirts, so now I just have to like press them myself, ship them to myself, keep track of them myself. Like, it's
Hmm.
literally all me. So just in the campaign, I was like, if you want a T-shirt, send a Bandcamp message, and
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that.
okay, I'll manage it. I've done that. Um, but on the upshot, aside from like the massive number of emails that I had to send back and forth, with Bandcamp to get everything straight and make sure everything was okay. And there was an extra hitch, and that is that I'm the first tribute
Hmm.
to ever be pressed to vinyl through the Bandcamp program.
Okay.
Um, and, so there's this extra step or layer or whatever that not everyone's thinking about, even people that have done this before. And that's that I have to license all of my tracks.
Right. Right.
So, like, this is a Nine Inch Nails cover album. I have to remit, like $1.50 for every single album I sell to HFA, Harry Fox Agency, which covers the mechanical licensure and then passes royalties on to Trent.
Hmm.
So, they don't have a mechanism built in for that. Like
Gotcha.
other people, like, I don't know, SoundDrop or DistroKid or any of the, like people that are designed to do this. You just type in, this is a cover, it's a cover of such and such, whatever. They're
Yeah.
like, okay, pay for your licenses and we'll just send the royalties automatically. It's cookie cutter, it's very easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Bandcamp doesn't have any mechanisms like that
Hmm.
anywhere in the system. So for stuff like Pretty Ape Machine on Bandcamp, I mean, I've got it on Apple, right? I've
Yeah.
got it on Amazon, whatever. And all of that happens automatically, and
They
that's
take
all
care of all that.
fine
Yeah.
and good. Right. But Bandcamp isn't my conduit to the outside world. Bandcamp is only Bandcamp. So for all of the licenses on the other side, I have to top them up manually myself and send out NOIs or, like that,
Okay.
like write checks, or
Yeah.
not checks, but, like basically just go and purchase the licenses off the cuff. And that can get frustrating, but usually what I do is I just buy enough that I know I'm not going to run out for a while and top it up later.
Sure. No, that makes
They
sense.
have a little reorder button that makes it kind of easy.
They
And,
make it easy.
like, I mean, there are ways to make this easy. The point is that since Bandcamp definitely doesn't have, like the option to do that with your digital, there definitely isn't, a way
Yeah.
to do it with the vinyl. And so at first, I submitted my thing. I was like, this is going to be great. Pretty Ape Machine can probably make the minimum order for records, whatever. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And I even put my like little description for the campaign. I was like, this will be officially licensed. I've been around the block with licensing. I know how to remit my royalties. I know how to send NOIs. Like I know how to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that won't be a problem either. And that's what I had to do in the Kickstarter, 9 years ago or whatever, is be like, part of the reason I'm kickstarting this is because literally like $500 to $1,000 of this has to go
to the artist.
royalties.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of it has to go into buying the CDs in advance and, that sort of a thing. So these are my upfront costs. I don't care about the back end costs. I care about, the front end costs.
Yeah.
So I put that in this thinking, okay, that's how we're going to do it. Right. And I get an email back like the next morning, like it hasn't even been 24 hours, with a 1-word rejection letter, copyright. And I'm like, oh God, they didn't read anything I had to say. And so I email and I'm like, listen, and then I realized they had already actually sent me a long email along with it, but it was separate from like the rejection notice. So
Yeah.
I didn't see their email or whatever. And so I read it and they're like, listen, we're not set up for covers. And there's like, we can't handle doing your covers right now. I'm really sorry. Can you pick another album? And I emailed them back and I was like, listen, if you picked me because I'm a top performer on Bandcamp, this album is the reason that I'm a top performer on Bandcamp.
Right.
This is what we need to press. I know how to manage a cover album. I already do it for all my other work. I'm in the clear. I've met the band, I have a picture with Trent. Here it is, like he endorsed my copy. Here's his signature on my
copy.
album. I think that we can make this work.
Yeah.
And time passes, and time passes, and time passes, and time passes. And it's been like, I don't know, it felt like a week or something like that. I finally hear back and they're like, okay, I talked to everyone. We can do it. We need you to produce a license for 250 copies up front. Just a good faith, like send us the receipt for 250 licenses.
Okay.
And then we'll move forward.
Okay.
And so I was like, can we do this after the campaign succeeds, but before the record is printed? Because one, then I'll actually have the money to pay the licenses.
Yeah.
And two, like to buy the licenses up front. And two, then I'll actually have hard numbers on how many licenses I'm going to need to get. Because if I, exceed 250, I have to go and buy them again. And what a lot of people don't know is that if you use HFA instead of one of the other guys, they charge you, or even sometimes the other guys, they charge you a fee to underwrite the license.
To like a processing fee or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So you pay the processing fee every time, no matter how many licenses you buy.
Yeah.
You buy one license, the processing fee is $15. You buy 500 licenses, the processing fee is $15.
Right.
So I wanted to avoid, and I mean, for 10 tracks, it's like $150.
Yeah.
So I don't want to like drop $100, $200 just to top up. I want
Yeah.
to do it all at once. So I
Right.
tell them this, and they're like, well, if you can license the digital up front, and then once you sell the records, if you can, do the records on the back end. And I already have a certain number of licenses for digital already because like I
Yeah.
topped up, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll top it up even more. I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do 500 licenses
Mm-hmm.
for the digital. And I was like, that tops me up. That takes care of this. Um, and then when the records sell, I'll go and buy the licenses for the records.
Yeah.
And you have to buy different mediums separately anyway, so
Right.
it works out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like that was like a 2 week or maybe even 2.5 week or something like that process where I was literally, I'm the first cover album to be, or I'm the first cover album to be, legal or in the clear or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
to and I'm on the radar and above the radar and like whatever. So that was interesting. I mean, their little interface or whatever is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only hitch I got in was, like I want a different cover for the vinyl
Then the
than like my CD cover.
right. Okay.
And what they do is they just, like take whatever your CD cover is
They just
and
copy and
put it
paste
on
it
the
over
cover
there.
of a record and be
Yeah.
like, this is what it will look like. And so, like I don't want that. I want something different for the records.
Yeah.
So,
It'd make it special.
right. So, so there's that. And they were like, okay, so we can switch out the image if you just upload it as a second image, and we'll just, do the good old switcheroo. So that's fine. But I mean, pretty much no hitches other than that.
That's cool.
Now that it's running, the major frustration I'm getting from fans, not like a frustration in administration or running it or anything. It seems to be doing fine, and I've sent out like a whole 2 updates because I'm awful. But the big thing that has happened with fans is that you can only pledge for 1 record.
Oh, I didn't think
and some
about
people
that.
are like, I want 2. I want to give 1 to a friend or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that, and there's no way to do it. So I've just been like, I don't know, pledge double and send me a message or something so that I can, send you a record and I'll order some extras at the end. And that's like, that's all I can do.
Sure.
So, like that's been a little bit of a hitch, and they told me that this is default behavior. Now, this is my first record, right? But I've talked to a lot of record pressing facilities, and I've looked into this a lot.
Yeah.
And they've told me that the plant keeps my dub plates, and that's policy. And most of the plants I looked into when I was going to do it myself will send me my dub plates afterwards.
Right. That's kind of what I've seen in my little bit of research, is that they'll send them back to you.
Yeah. So, send them back. Like, I'm not sending them dub plates.
Right. Yeah. You get them.
But but I mean, some people do expect you to send dub plates. Like, you can be like,
Okay.
here are my dub plates, make my record.
Okay. Gotcha.
And you can go to a different facility and have your dub plates made, and then, a separate facility to have it pressed.
Okay.
So one thing that surprised me, that I just found out, I don't know, yesterday, is that I cannot have my dub plates.
Oh.
And that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But they're managing everything, right? Like, how can I complain?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to have any dealing with the factory. Like, I deal direct with the Bandcamp rep, and my Bandcamp rep deals with the factory. And
they take care of so much of it.
Damaged discs and shipments, Bandcamp's going to handle. Shipping, Bandcamp's going to handle. Fulfillment, Bandcamp's going to handle. I mean, like, so there are a lot of good things about doing it through Bandcamp that aren't, like that are things that normally, artists and musicians are dealing with, and I'm just not dealing with it.
Yeah. Not everybody's set
It's
up
funny
for that.
though, because most of my CDs, I ship them out by hand. I don't use a fulfillment house.
Okay.
like I send them direct, and I've worked out the cheapest ways to ship international and ship domestic. And, like I try to send out like stickers and a written note with, like
Mm-hmm.
CD orders.
That's cool.
I'm not going to be able to do any of that with the LPs, and that kind of sucks.
Sure.
But on the other hand, like, okay, it's fine. Like I tell people, buy a track on my Bandcamp for $1, include your address, and I'll just go and buy a stamp with your track money and send you
Sure.
stickers if
That's
you
very
really
cool.
want it or something. So, like I feel like there are ways to mitigate the problems that I'm having,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing my best with that.
Well, no,
But
that's cool.
I feel like there are ways that the process could be made better. Um,
Yeah.
if you threw a little effort into it.
Yeah, I'm sure
Um,
that it's early days in this kind of thing, and I'm sure if we talked again in
yeah,
5 years, Bandcamp or whoever is the next Bandcamp would have, they will have improved
a
and
better
learned, and
process. Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure it'll evolve eventually.
yeah.
Well, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. I mean, we've been talking for over an hour. What do you have? Do you have any major? Are you looking at any projects beyond this, or yet? Or are you still 100% on
Oh,
getting those vinyls
that's
taken
a
care of?
great question. So, I mean, I've released several albums
Yeah,
after Pretty Eight Machine.
yeah, you've got
Like,
a lot of work.
Chip Lust was my follow-up to Retro Covered, which was it's just a collection of like top mix hits,
Hmm.
pop covers, whatever, with maybe one or two like video game covers peppered in there or whatever. But uh, I used to try and do a track a month, and then after a year of doing tracks, I would have basically a CD worth. So I would just
Right.
release like a mixed CD
That's
of
okay.
of the tracks. And so that's what I would like sell at conventions and like whatever. And so like Chip Lust, Retro Covered, and my Guilty Gear album, Midnight Chip Tunes, were all released at Otakon, which is the giant Baltimore. Well, it's DC, but
Hmm.
anime convention.
Okay.
Um, and like so I did after Pretty Eight Machine. Well, so my stuff is numbered. Pretty Eight Machine is 004,
Hmm.
and then Chip Lust is 006. And then like or is it 005? No, it's 006. I don't even know. Um, no, but then there's Biteration One, which is this sort of I had an idea, and that was that I would release one album on every sound chip,
Okay.
right? So like Biteration One, which is called Genesis of Consequence. I bet you can't guess what system I wrote that music on.
I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, so I did a Sega Genesis album, and it's like basically a pile of Sega Genesis EDM.
Okay.
And while I'm working on it, I realize like I could really have fun with this and learn stuff about the Sega Genesis. I had done Sega Genesis tracks, but the real inspiration for that album was I was explaining to someone that FM synthesis, like the Sega or like old sound cards or like old Yamaha keyboards or whatever,
Yeah.
um, dubstep uses the exact same FM synthesis technique to create bass wobbles.
Hmm.
And so I would explain the similarities and whatever, and everyone would be like, Brendan, why haven't you written like Sega Genesis dubstep? And you're like, well, and finally it came to a head, and I was like at Magstock, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna write some Sega Genesis dubstep. I'm gonna do whatever the best job I can do in like a day
Hmm.
is,
Yeah.
and then I'm playing a show tomorrow. I'll just play it tomorrow and see what people say. And I'd already been like talking about this at the show, so I was like, all right, everyone I was talking to yesterday about Sega Genesis dubstep, here it
There
is.
it is.
And like played it and whatever, and it ended up being a little bit of a banger. So I was like, all right, let's do some more. Um, in the midst of all of this, an indie game developer gets in touch with me from France,
Hmm.
and they're like, we're writing a game and we need a soundtrack, and like we really like these artists and whatever, and we like your work too, and we thought that you might be a good fit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, what are you looking for? And they're like, well, we don't really know. Chiptunes. I'm like, okay, you have a system in mind, like, whatever you think is best. I was like,
Okay.
okay, well, for me to think what is best, tell me about your game. Well, we can't tell you about that. Okay, can you tell me like even like what it's about? Can you tell me what kind of game it is? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, it's just fun and action packed. Okay.
Help me help
And
you.
so I was like, all right, so how much are you offering? And they're like, well, we can offer you a percentage of sales. And that's actually a common response. But I was like, since I don't know anything about your game, I can't really believe in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, if you want to sign a non-disclosure agreement, then we can talk. I was like, listen, you're an indie developer. You've got like less followers on Twitter than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will promise you that I won't say anything about your game. But I, like I'm about to say no. If you want me to be on your game, tell me what it's about. And if you don't, that's fine. No offense, no hard feelings.
Right.
And so uh, I get a reply as like, it's very important. We've been burned in the past. That you not talk about this. It's a game about poop. And I'm like,
Huh.
well, I wasn't expecting that. So I'm thinking about it, and I'm working on Biteration 1 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if people didn't get the pun, most people are like, I get it, but if you don't, I get it, you'll get it in a second. Iteration is counting,
Yeah.
and the idea is that my Biteration series, Biteration 2, Biteration 3, Biteration 4.
Right.
So like how Led Zeppelin has 1, 2, 3, 4. So my first Biteration is Sega stuff, and I'm just working on this. And I was like, you know what? I could just turn this into the soundtrack for this game. And FM synthesis also sounds like farts. So, if if you do, like if you do it right, I'll just make Sega Genesis farty bass music, and it'll be EDM, but it'll be EDM with like synthesizers that sound just a little bit wet or like whatever, and it'll be fun. Let's have fun with this. And so I send him an email. I was like, listen, what do you think about the Mega Drive, which is a Genesis in Europe?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, it's my favorite system. I was like, okay, this is perfect. Here's my idea. And I tell them, all of that and whatever. And they're like, whatever you think is best, this sounds great. And so, like we begin a relationship, and it's, like it is now the soundtrack in that game.
Nice.
I haven't seen a paycheck in a couple of years, but I assume that everything's doing fine. I don't know. But so that was interesting. And that album, so like what I'm circling back to is you're asking me about other projects.
Yeah.
This album is going to be released on a cartridge.
Nice.
So I'm going to have a legit Sega Genesis cartridge that you can put in your Genesis and listen to the album on the Genesis.
That's really cool.
And hopefully, so the reason it hasn't come out yet is I was working with a 68K programmer, someone that can do, like machine code for a Sega Genesis and whatever.
Yeah.
And that kind of fell apart a little bit. And, didn't really, come to fruition. I'm going to hire someone else and whatever. And I really want to pay them for their time or something like that. And
right.
That'll be nice. And so I'm just still kind of working on that. But also we had a little bit of feature creep. We want you to sort of be able to not just read liner notes or pick which song you want to listen to, but we want you also to be able to sort of like pseudo remix the song while you're listening to it.
That's
like,
cool.
Mess with the lead instrument at any point while you're, like hit some buttons, add some drums. I don't know.
That's cool.
We'll figure it out.
It's a cool idea. Yeah.
So that's caused a little bit of a delay. I already ran a pre-order for them, and it's already sold out. So I assume, once we finally get our shit together, my life is just, like everything keeps on piling on. In life, 2020 tried to kill me a couple times. I think it tried to kill everyone.
Yeah, I think
times.
everybody.
Yeah. But eventually, I'm going to get that done. And I think that'll be great. So that's one thing that's coming out. Another thing is several years ago, well, I mentioned the synthesizer, right, that I'm
Yeah,
building.
yeah, yeah.
So um, several years ago, I actually got the synthesizer to do something, which is, like better than it not doing something.
Hmm.
Um, you're like,
Huh,
yeah.
it actually
Uh,
works. Yeah.
uh,
Good show.
so I really haven't had a whole lot of time to spend on it. And so one of the things that has been stopping me from just working on anything at all is I really want the synthesizer to be a little bit more mature so that I can write albums on it.
Hmm.
And for example, it really needs a save feature right now. It doesn't have one.
Okay.
Uh,
Might
but
be
it
nice to have.
does, well, yeah, it would be good to be able to load and save. What it does do is it has an import feature. I mean, the software is written by me, right? So I wrote an import feature, is maybe what I should be saying, uh, for all of my other music trackers. So I can load in stuff from Create Machine or
Okay. Yeah.
some of my tracks from Chiplust or whatever and play them on hardware without having to like send a file through like 5 different conversion processes
Right.
and
Right.
like
It's a little
basically
more
send it to
streamlined.
hell and back so that I end up with like something that's on a floppy disk that I can put in a Commodore 64 so that I can load and
Yeah.
hit play and whatever. So like I can I can now circumvent all of these steps. Just load my project in file,
Hmm.
like the original project file can be loaded in, and I can be like, this plays on a Commodore 64 play button, and it just works. Um, so that is pretty cool. But the problem is just that like I can't. I can tweak it a little bit, but I can't do a whole lot with it other than that.
Sure.
And I really, like it needs to be more mature.
More
I need
mature. Yeah.
to, you know. Um, once it is, I really want to do Downward Spiral.
That would be
I
awesome.
want to keep doing some Nine Inch Nails, but I also have, like I'd really like to do some other acts,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
Nine Inch Nails
You want to
stuff.
be
There's some
just the.
albums that,
Yeah. You could be
yeah,
some other band's 8-bit guy too.
right. And I mean, Nine Inch Nails is probably my favorite act, like hands down. But there are a whole lot of other acts that I do really like.
Hmm.
And I mean, you can see on Retro Covered and Chip Lust that there are like things that I'm obviously a fan of.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Um, so anyway, synthesizer completion is another big project, and then that will lead to other albums coming out, which will also be nice.
Yeah.
And I can do more iterations, just do them on the synthesizer. That would be fine.
Hmm.
Um, Stuff like that. So that is a big project. And then I suppose related to everything is just work on my museum is like just a big side project that is constantly ongoing. Um, right now I'm separating audio. Let's try this again. Separating software from hardware. Um, and I've got like, I don't know, I think I started with 26 to 28 pallets
Wow.
loaded with like computers and old game systems, controllers, games, whatever. And I've slowly organized and whittled it down and like thrown away like my personal belongings and whatever. Like Thanksgiving 2018 I moved into an RV full time, so I don't like live in an apartment anymore
Hmm.
or whatever, which is ended up being a really good choice because then I don't have to pay rent, which
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
Um, so, like I'm living in this RV or whatever, but basically, like sort of living in the back of a warehouse during the day and living in my RV at night and
Sure.
whatever, and just doing this. Like I've spent basically almost the last year and a half, just coming in every day. And I do work on music, but I mean, like I have the freedom to do whatever I want
Yeah.
because it's my museum entity. So I don't, I decide what I
You're the
do.
boss. Yeah.
I don't pay myself. So, like I can easily say, well, I'm not paying myself, so I need to work on some music. But that also requires inspiration to show up, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I know how that is.
but in the meantime, I've gotten so organized. It's wonderful. Like this is the first time, not just in my adult life, but in my life ever, that like all of my video games have finally been in like one place and
Hmm.
whatever. And I mean, it's not. I was always a game collector and like a retro
Yeah.
gamer nerd and whatever. But I decided maybe about 12, 13 years ago that I actually wanted to do the museum thing.
Yeah.
Um, and and then things went a little bit crazy. Like then I actually started acquiring more weird stuff and more rare stuff, and
Hmm.
like things that like other people either don't know, or like one of a kind items, stuff like that.
That's cool.
Um, so uh, I am about to cross the 5,100 line items. Like I have 5,100 things, not
Hmm.
counting quantities.
Sure.
Just individual
Yeah.
identifiers of things for the museum that are just like game related,
That's
like
cool.
a game system or a game or whatever. And so like most of that software, right? So I also had to devise like a storage solution to store games in cabinets and
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, they make cabinets for this, but they're like $800 a pop,
Right.
and I don't have that kind of money, and I'm not going to make that kind of money as a musician. So what do I do, right? So
Yeah.
I figured out how to repurpose, like lateral files, and now I literally store like 1,000 to 2,000 games in each palette or
Hmm.
whatever, and I've whittled down the number of palettes from like 28 down to like 16, and really gotten organized. It feels really good,
Hmm.
um, and I'm like 90% done with that. And then I have to go through and find everything that wasn't a game and wasn't a game system and wasn't something, and like go and inventory all of that too, and actually build exhibits out of these and whatever. But in the meantime, putting like items together and putting them in bins and like
Yeah.
labeling the bin and that sort of thing has been a huge help. So for 30 years I've been collecting games, and finally they are like
It's finally
all of my
paying off.
Xbox games live together and all my Atari games live together, and
Nice.
whatever. Um,
Awesome.
so so those are all of my big projects. I have little dreams here and there, like my partner, who we entered a relationship about just a little under 2 years ago, is actually living with me, and is also a chip tuner,
Hmm.
which is weird because there's a little bit of an age gap. So like I'm the old guy that grew up with all of these systems, and my partner, they didn't. They grew up with like a Centipede arcade machine.
Okay.
So there's a pokey in that. That's like definitively chip tune. If you
Hmm.
wanted to say, Centipede
Sure.
doesn't really have music, but the point is that like then, uh, like the next system after that is like not current gen, but like is not considered retro to me. Like we're talking
Sure.
about like
Sure.
PlayStation 2, Xbox era stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which is definitively not chiptune. But the way we met actually is that I gave a seminar down at Full Sail in Florida, and the professor that taught the class is also sort of in the game music scene or whatever. And basically, I gave the retro version. He did a class called Music Production for Media,
Okay.
and as a part of the class he would teach you to use just briefly like how to produce music for a game,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
whatever, and be like, okay, and there are these toolkits, and one of them is called Wise and the other one's called Fmod, and Fmod evolves from the mod files that I was talking about.
Right.
Like that's the toolkit, right? Whatever. So I heard he was going to give a talk about that. It's like, well, how about I give the 30-year-old version of your talk
Hmm.
after you give the modern version of your talk? He's like, oh, that'd be funny
That's
and
cool.
whatever. And so I just shot the shit with the class for a little bit and whatever. And it was pretty lukewarm because it was the last class of that term.
Sure.
So everyone was like burnt out and senioritis and about to graduate and whatever. And like one person asks a question, and that person is now my
Nice.
partner. And while we've been going out or whatever, my partner has actually released two Famicom chiptune albums.
Nice.
like in their own right, whatever. So uh, anyway, this is the long version of me saying I'd really like to do a collaboration. Like we've come up with like ideas for tracks and
Hmm.
themes and like that sort of a thing, and talked about how we would pass tracks back and forth and whatever. And we have really no idea how any of it will work or how it will turn out or whatever. But we'd love to do just an album that's both of us.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
really cool idea.
so that would be neat. And yeah, I mean, I've talked with other friends about collaborating too,
Hmm.
and doing other stuff. So that would be fun. I mean, I could probably just list off dreams forever and put you to sleep. It'd be your like nighttime bedtime story. Um, but those, I think
Yeah.
those are the big major ones.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, all of those, each of those would be really awesome to, well, if, obviously, I'm sure you'll post on your Twitter and socials and stuff about if and when those things come to fruition. Those would be super interesting.
yeah, I'll get noisy.
Yeah, for sure. If people want to check out your stuff, is the best place Bandcamp? Like, what's the best place for you? What's going to get you the
So
most?
So yeah, I mean, if you want to get me the most money, if you want to listen to the majority of my work, the entire body of my work is on Bandcamp. Uh, please, please, God, please don't listen to my SoundCloud. Like I don't know what it is with people in SoundCloud, but like SoundCloud doesn't pay artists. They actually charge you to have your music on their platform.
Right.
They don't give you royalties when you get plays. It's just a popularity contest as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's such
And
a
like,
weird platform.
it's useful to be able to like the one thing that I like about SoundCloud is someone can like while they're listening to my track, they can leave a comment at that
At that
specific point in
mark
time and be
in
like,
this track, yeah.
"Yo, I love the way the bass drops right now."
Yeah.
Like, okay, sure, great. But like, does that warrant putting your music on a platform where people can't like buy it very easily? I mean, like, okay, maybe there are people out there that just like don't want to sell their music, but like even then, like, are you doing music to like, even if you're releasing your music for free, aren't you releasing it to like have a fan base or to like connect with
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
Or like, forget people be like, no, I'm just doing this for me, man. Like, okay, fine, put it on SoundCloud, put it on YouTube, whatever.
Yeah.
But the instant that you want to connect with more people, and the instant you need like some platform that will let you, I mean, God, this is sound awful, but like collect email addresses or,
Hmm.
like anything that, I mean, forget the email address thing. Like, at least you can click follow on Bandcamp. I know you can on SoundCloud too, but the instant I release something new, Bandcamp is very faithful about emailing all of my
Yep.
followers. If I decided to sell something, it instantly goes out to people. Like, and like someone downloads something, it's in the system.
Hmm.
You see it on the front page as a sale that just happened. Like, there's a very,
It's
there's a community
yeah.
involved with Bandcamp. So I guess what I'm saying is I have SoundCloud, but I hate it. I have a YouTube channel, but there's a lot of stuff on there that is also informational. I don't really have like, maybe I should split it off into like, me music videos, or whatever. Like, there's like 9 Inch Nails, and then there's 9 Inch Nails Vivo, or, like
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I can't get a Vivo channel. I'm not big enough, or whatever. But um, so, really, if you want to hear the most stuff that I have, if you want a chance at my discography so that you can get literally everything I've ever released,
Hmm.
uh, you know, you find it on Bandcamp. And Bandcamp's fun to explore on because if you're, for example, on my page with Chip Cluster Retro covered or whatever, click on the track titles and it takes you to the single download for the track, like, where you buy the
Yeah.
track instead of buying the album. But I've left liner notes for individual tracks. So you can like, kind of treasure hunt around or
Yeah.
whatever
That's one
for
of the really
like
cool things.
information and morsels. And um, so I did a little bit of that. I'm probably the noisiest on Twitter. I'm kind of noisy on Facebook, and I neglect Instagram, and I shouldn't. But that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Um, and those are the big places to connect. I have a Patreon,
Hmm.
and I literally rely on it to feed me. So, like if you want to jump on my Patreon, that'd be great.
Yeah,
And there's one for my museum too. Well, I'm talking to the world, not just to you, but like, um, the point is that there we do have a reasonably active Discord community connected to the Patreon.
oh, that's cool.
So, like I announce things there. I have a sneak previews tier for, like, so they can hear game soundtracks I'm working on before I release them. Stuff like that. Um, and I do live stream on Twitch, and
Okay.
play video games with my partner and whatever. Like not really music related, although I have done several. Like I've done. There's a video game museum in Oakland called the Maid,
Okay.
um, and they're a lot like Bloop, my museum. We kind of have similar goals. Um, but the point is that they have an anniversary party every year, and for at least two of those anniversary parties, I've actually remote DJ'd over Twitch.
Nice.
And that was kind of fun because like people could just join the Twitch channel and make requests, and then they would play over the loudspeakers at the Maid. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a cool way to
Yeah, that's really
be a
cool.
part of the anniversary party. But most of the time, it's just me playing like variety retro. I did do a long play of Mother, which is Earthbound Zero or Earthbound Beginnings or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm gonna do a long play of like Earthbound for the Super Nintendo
Oh, nice.
proper and a few other games. And I played through almost all of XCOM and failed to win it. Um, I need to maybe finish that off. So there's me playing those games. Lately, it's actually my partner and I. Since there's that the huge like gap I was talking about, like in the 8 and 16-bit game era
Yeah.
for my partner. My partner and I have just been playing a ton of like I'll just pick an assortment of games, or we'll like pull Twitter or whatever and be like, tonight we're gonna play cute puzzle games, and then we just find like a bunch of 8 and 16-bit
And you
puzzle
fill that
games and
gap.
play them.
Yeah,
Right.
that's awesome.
And I try to like educate a little bit while we're doing it, but mostly we're just there to have fun. And a lot of people that are in the stream are my fans, and like some of the patrons
Hmm.
that are supporting me and that sort of a thing. So it's again, it's another like kind of cute community, but that's a good way to connect with me. And occasionally I will do a live stream where I'm actually like writing music on stream, so that you can see how it comes together or whatever. And I went ahead and highlighted when I was writing Sega Genesis sound effects for a game. I went ahead and highlighted that stream, so it should still,
Hmm.
fingers crossed, be on my channel.
Okay.
If you
Yeah.
want to see me working in a tracker and that sort of a thing, there are a couple of those on my YouTube too. A couple videos about like the demo scene is very near and dear to me. I'm very much a part of this, and that's sort of tracker music files or mods come from this like demo scene of, and it's not like game demos, it's like a demonstration of programming ability.
Okay.
So people are like, uh, any cool special effects or like visuals or whatever that you see in games or movies or whatever probably were done by the demo scene 2-3 years before you ever saw them in a game.
Hmm. Okay.
And these are people that are just like trying to do cool visual effects, often under crazy constraints. Like, can we do 3D graphics on an Atari?
Hmm.
Can we play an MP3 or a FLAC file on a Commodore 64? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, like
Trying to.
people that are like literally trying to like do the impossible on these like old machines. But chiptunes very much intersect with demo scene stuff, and
Hmm.
so you'll be watching demos with like chiptunes that sometimes use like groundbreaking audio ideas and that sort of thing. So
Nice.
I have this 3-hour long presentation that I promise is actually not very boring, but but that is like one of my most watched videos. And if I could tell anyone to watch something to kind of understand where I'm coming from and what my scene is about
Yeah.
or whatever, I'd suggest that. So like these are the best ways
Okay.
to kind of
Yeah.
dig deeper, learn about me, learn about my music, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'll definitely link. I while you were talking, I was able to pull up like the Patreon and the Twitch, and so I'll put all
Cool.
that stuff in the show notes. so people can go check that out. And thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. It was it was awesome conversation. I didn't even get a chance to just kind of rant and rave. Like back in the day when that initial blast of, hey, check out this 8-bit stuff. I was in that that following, and I have already, before we talked, put in my order for that for the 8-bit, for Pretty 8 Machine vinyl. So
Cool. Thanks for supporting.
thank you. I mean, this just been fun just to kind of hang out, like, and just for me on a personal level, just kind of hang out and like, hey, I know that guy from the internet, like, and I got to talk to him. So thank you.
Sorry that guy from the internet did like 95% of the talking.
No, I mean that's the point of the interview. That's the point of the interview. It's like, it's better than, I would much rather have this kind of a conversation than a 10-minute conversation where they just said, yeah, that was a fun project, and then just move on to the next question.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
No, just kidding. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
If people have follow-up questions
Yeah.
or whatever, they should totally just yell at me on Twitter. You can, if they ask you, then you can yell them at me on Twitter.
Yeah, people are pretty good about
whatever. I'm
going
pretty
straight
noisy
to the
on the
source.
internet.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, thank you so much. And I'll wrap
no
it up
problem.
here. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So I'm just shutting down.